welcome back to the Whitby Public Library's podcast, Doorway to Discovery. I am Kate, and my pronouns are she, her, and you can find me at the Brooklyn branch.
I'm Erin. My pronouns are also she, her, and you can find me at the Central branch.
Hi there, I'm Kylie, and my pronouns are also she, her, and you can find me at the Roslyn branch.
All three branches are here today.
Today we're going to be talking about mysteries. The mystery genre. We're going to be covering all the different types of mysteries, and we're going to give you some suggestions on what you might like to read if you haven't gotten into the mystery genre before, or if you're an old hand at mystery and you need some fresh reads.
There's like cozy mysteries, which we'll talk about.
Cozy.
There's like your classical whodunit, or classic whodunit, I should say. Yeah, Agatha Christie, good choice. And then you've got like thrillers, which are still kind of considered mysteries. It just means that the genre is quite large, and hopefully you can definitely find something that you vibe with in those three main ones. And then there's obviously subcategories.
Okay, so before we get started with our book recommendations, we just wanted to mention too that this was one of our winners from the poll that we put out earlier this year. So here are some mysteries. I'm going to start with a cozy mystery that I've been reading called Death in a Budapest Butterfly by Julia Buckley. This is part of her Hungarian Tea House mystery series, and I've actually become very obsessed with it lately. It is a cozy mystery. It follows Hannah and her mother and grandmother, who own a tea house in a small town. Very normal tea house. They host tea parties. And then one day at one of their tea parties, a woman is murdered. So hence cue the beginning of the mystery. So we have classic cozy. We have a not very gory mystery, which I like. I'm not one to be scared, so I liked that. So the entire mystery kind of revolves around figuring out who would have murdered this woman at the tea, which was, it was a tea for a bunch of little old ladies. So they're kind of trying to figure out, was this an older woman who murdered someone, or did somebody else sneak in? And kind of in the vein of the cozy mystery, there is also a nice romance element, which I really enjoyed. Hannah ends up kind of falling for the detective on the case. And she also has kind of psychic abilities that start to kind of come to fruition throughout the book that help her and help her detective boyfriend to solve the case. So I really enjoyed this one. There's also there's cats involved. Hannah has a cat. Love a cat. And it's also quite fun. It's a very, it's a great like small town vibe. Also, it's a series. I have the third book also. I don't have the second one with me, but I have the third one too. And the series kind of starts in October, and into the third book, we're in December now, and I'm just kind of loving the cozy vibes from it. But it's also very fun. Like Hannah collects antique like teacups and antique like statues, and her whole thing is like collecting art. And it's very fun to kind of see that side of it too. I feel like I'm learning about art while I'm also reading about mysteries.
That's so cute.
Yeah, it's really fun. And also the romance element, as I mentioned, it's very fun reading it because it doesn't revolve around the romance. So there's not a whole lot of like drama with the romance. It's not like we're breaking up and we're back together, and we're breaking up and we're back together. It's just like, oh yeah, that's my boyfriend, the detective. So it's nice. It's like, yeah, it's nice. It's just like, oh yeah, this is just like it's an established romance, which I like. It's nice to have that. There's the element of it, but it's not the focus. So it's nice. I've been really enjoying a good cozy mystery lately.
It's true, listeners. She's been blowing up our group chat about about all the cozies.
They're so fun. Yeah,
And
I used
whenever
to think,
I'm on Goodreads, you're just like cozy, cozy, cozy. I love it.
yes, I used to think cozy mysteries were like, I don't know, really cheesy. You'd see like some of the covers and they're all like really punny, and I was like, oh yeah, cozy
Like the
mysteries. And then I
chocolate
start,
chip cookie murderer.
yeah, like they're really like they're hilarious titles. I love it. But I was like, oh yeah, like that's not really my thing. And then I started reading one, and now I can't stop reading them. They're very fun. So yeah, give it a try. You might find something new that you like in a cozy mystery.
Well, I'm obsessed with the ones, I think they're by Donna Andrews, the ones that are all bird puns. And like takes on classic literature, but it's just they put birds into the title. I cannot think of one for the life of me now, but they're really, anytime I'm shelving in the mystery section, I'm always like, I want to read those just for the funny titles.
I love a good pun, so it's perfect.
I think like a requirement of a cozy is that like 25% of your titles have to be puns.
Yeah.
Like I like all the knitting ones, and you're just like,
yes.
And there's like 42 of them, and you're like, I have so many questions.
All the bake sale ones.
I love the
like all the
ones.
food murder ones. So there's like the chocolate chip cookie murder, and like the sweet potato pie murder, and there's like a
recipe for murder.
Yeah. There's also like an actual recipe, like the end of each one. I'm like, oh, I wonder if these cookies are any good.
And that's the thing that I really love about the cozy too, is that like, yes, there's a mystery, and yes, there's like kind of danger element going on, but they always have a hobby that like takes up a lot of the book. Like with this one, Hannah goes antiquing all the time. Like one of her friends like owns this little like art shop and he's always calling her being like, oh, I have this new tea set that you might like. And it's just so fun that she's just always like, and I've gotten a new teacup today that I'll have to put on my shelf. And I'm like, oh, good for you. I love it. Yeah, it's cute. Like in the baking ones, like they just love to bake, and it's fun. Like the cozy mysteries have a very I don't know, it's just kind of like a layout. Like there's always a fun hobby, there's always, a murder, but it's not gory, and there's always kind of like I feel like there's almost always an animal sidekick. Oh. Like so much of the time there's like a cat or like a cute little dog who helps them solve the crimes. Sometimes I read one, I didn't finish it, but I started one where there was a talking cat. And I was like, all right, sure. And the talking cat, I believe the blurb said that the talking cat helps solve the crime.
Of course, so, I was going to say,
amazing.
Solve the mystery.
Yeah, cozy mysteries, they're very fun.
What did you read?
And so I didn't reread this one for the podcast. I'm sorry, but it's one of my favorite books of all time. And it was actually the first the first book I took out of a public library when I was a kid. So it's Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And this launched my obsession with Agatha Christie, which, as you can see, is healthy. The ones I own. I have more on e-reader. We won't get into it. I haven't read her in a while, but there was a time there when I only read Agatha Christie. And she's of course the classic whodunit. There's a murder, and then usually it's a closed cast of characters, and there's a detective, or you just need to figure out what happens through the character interactions. So I love those. What I love about And Then There Were None, which the plot, for those of you that don't know, is basically a group of people with varying professions get invited to this private island, and then slowly they each start to die. And so the remaining survivors need to figure out who is actually killing them, and they're all like deserted on this island, and there's no way they can get help. So it's a fantastic locked room mystery. So it's just, they start to do the thing where they, team up, and they won't, they need to have a partner And so they can never go anywhere alone. And then that way they'll know who the murderer is. But then, of course, people get split up. So it's the classic, you know, it kind of laid the groundwork for all those locked door mysteries that have followed, and all, like, so many movies that have gone on the same theme. And the actual, and then there were none movie that came out, I think it was in the 40s that the movie came out. It's fantastic. It's so well done. It's one of my favorite movies. And it's just, what I love about a good whodunit is that, like Kylie was saying about the cozies, it's not gory. Usually it's just like, there is a murder and then we need to solve it. And so then you get to follow the detective footsteps and see what they can figure out. That's why I like Sherlock Holmes as well. Kylie, did you grab your copy of Sherlock Holmes?
I do. Ooh, I have a pile of books. It's at the bottom. Sherlock. I have sticky notes of all my favorites in there.
I've got mine somewhere over there. But what I love about them is that they're page turners, but they're not like, you don't necessarily feel scared. It's just pure suspense. And it's so fun to just explore the characters. I really like the character driven ones where you get to know each suspect and you get to figure out all the past relationships and all the motives that there could be. Like, another one of my favorite Agatha Christie's is Murder on the Orient Express, which is, of course, a classic. The old movie is also excellent. And it's just it focuses mostly on the character interactions, which is also often a staple of thrillers. But it's sort of more on, like, there are less gruesome details to be revealed, which I enjoy. But I like both thrillers and regular mystery, but what got me into the genre was just a classic mystery, because I found out that I really love the feeling of just reading a book and being in suspense the whole time. So yeah. So if you haven't read Agatha Christie, I highly recommend, and I feel like she's a great introduction into the mystery genre.
Of that.
I need to read some of those.
Yeah. I think I read Murder. Yeah, I read Murder on the Orient Express. But I'm going to come at you from the complete opposite vein. And not that, you know, whodunits and locked door mysteries are great. And cozies are so sweet. But I don't know what this says about me as a person. But I really prefer a thriller. I like the nitty-gritty of it, and I like the borderline fear that you get from them as well. So the one I wanted to talk to you about today is You by Caroline Kepnes. And I'm going to classify this as a thriller, but this is a really interesting book. It's kind of difficult to classify, and I put off reading it for so long, and I'm kicking myself now because I just finished it, and it's brilliant. So it follows Joe Goldberg, and he works in an independent bookstore. And the entire book, I think it's important to say, is his inner monologue and like his inner narration, which at first I was unsure about, but then when you're reading it, it provides like a really interesting perspective. And he's kind of like a very unreliable narrator, which is an interesting thing that I like in books too, because you never really know like what's real and you know what's exaggerated. So he works in an independent bookstore. He's the manager, and it starts off normally, and you know he's talking about his interactions with customers, and the new I think it's like a Dan Brown novel or something comes out, and he's judging everybody that's coming through the line, and he's like, oh, you know, you're all sheep and yada yada yada, because he's not a great person. And this girl named Beck comes through the line, and he's immediately obsessed with her. And he takes her credit card and he memorizes her name, and he looks her up on social media, and he begins to stalk her. But what's interesting is like his narration and his his logic is really off, and he'll be like, oh, well, you know, like you made eye contact with me for, you know, 3 to 5 seconds, and that tells me that you want me to look you up, Beck, like you want me to do this. And that's how he talks in the book. And what's really messed up is because you're hearing everything from his point of view and his narration, at times you root for him, which is crazy because he's a bad person. And so he stalks Beck, and then I don't want to give too many spoilers away, but he does unspeakable things that he claims are for her. And it's interesting because, so I wouldn't necessarily say this book is overly gruesome either, because when he is being violent, because you're in his head, he tends to gloss over the specifics. So I know some people are really kind of squeamish about violence or anything like that. So I wouldn't say that this one's an issue, because he'll literally be strangling somebody. Like, I'm just going to say that because it happens in the book. But he'll be thinking about like what he needs to do next. He'll be like, I really need to go get dinner for tonight, and like I have to call back to make sure that she knows. So he's like kind of disassociated. But it's a great book.
Creepy.
It's very creepy. It's very, very, very creepy, but it's definitely thrillerish, because obviously at some point Beck, they start to date, and then she kind of starts to put two and two together and realize what's going on, and she finds these clues. So you feel the underlying sense of urgency and that something's not right, from the way that she reacts to him. So you definitely kind of feel it like in your gut, and like what he's going to do, and then you see like the decisions that Beck makes, and you're like, no, my God, please don't do that. So it's an interesting book, and I really liked it, as creepy as it was. I don't know what that says about me, but but it was absolutely fantastic, and I would really suggest it. There is a sequel that I think is worth looking at, and it also got turned into a TV show on Netflix, which I
was going to say, I think that's a show too, right?
It was really good, but the one thing I will say, like, obviously people can choose whatever medium that they want to enjoy like their stories, but while the show was incredibly good and very well done, I don't think it quite captured the creepiness of Joe. Like, they really humanized him a little bit more in the TV show, which is fine, because I think that translates better for a screen. But I just want people to know that if they have watched the show and then they're interested in reading the book, he's a lot worse, creepier, and has much more of like a human reaction. Like, he's probably a full-on sociopath. So you should read it. It's really good. But it definitely falls, I think, under the thriller category, because it makes you feel uneasy.
Yeah. Well, I love the idea of an unreliable narrator. That's such a great device to use. And I just read, on your recommendation, Erin, I just read All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda.
I saw your review. Did you like it?
I loved it. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I have another Megan here because I love her, but this is the last house guest. But yeah, she's and it's an interesting narration, especially when you only get one perspective, especially in a mystery, because you don't know if you need to trust them or not.
And I also like when it's told from multiple perspectives that are all unreliable. For example, Lucy Foley's The Guest List, which I probably don't need to tell you about because everyone...
I haven't read it yet. It's on my list. It's on the top of my pile. I have it right here.
It's so good. I just got my best friend to read it. And she's just like texting me updates. She's just like, oh my God, I just found out that this happened. Because it's a cast of characters, so it's told from all of their different perspectives. And one of them has committed a murder. And you actually don't know who has been murdered. So it's going back and forth between after the murder has taken place and before the murder, and it's switching between the different perspectives of everyone. And you know that one of them is the murderer. So
that's cool.
It's amazing. It's another locked door mystery because it's an exclusive wedding on a private island. And
casual.
So it's casual. And our cast is the bride, the +1, the best man, the wedding planner, and the bridesmaid. And so they've all got secrets, and that get slowly revealed, and they've all got motives, and it's really, really well done.
I love that they're all unreliable narrators. That's really cool.
Well, and it really speaks to like storytelling capability as well. Like, I love an author that can pull off an unreliable narrator, and I think unreliable narrators work so well with locked door mysteries. It's basically like Clue, right? Like, you know, so and so with this in this, you know, room or whatever. There's another one that's, it's a YA, so young adult mystery, and you don't see those all that often, but the author is Karen McManus, and she writes fantastic mysteries, but the one that I'm thinking of is called One of Us is Lying.
Oh, yes.
And it's touted as like Agatha Christie meets The Breakfast Club.
Ooh.
Which is really cool because I think there's like 5 or 6 students and they're in detention, and one of the students dies like while in detention, and the other ones, I think there's like 6 of them, so one dies. The other 5 are immediately suspects, but you've got like the popular girl, you've got the jock, you've got like the emo kid or whatever, you know, the outcast. So they're all like typecast, and then you each get their perspective. And again, they're very unreliable because they're teenagers and all they are focused on their own, like their selves. They're like, oh, well, I can't talk about this guy, but I know, like, I'm really upset about not being voted prom queen. So yeah, and it was really good, and I did not see the ending coming. That's the other thing. Like, if you can surprise me with an ending for the amount of mystery that I read, I'm impressed. Because usually I'm like, nah, it was the teacher. It's not fun anymore.
That's so true. The ability for a book to surprise me as a mystery, that really helps me enjoy it. Because with the guest list, it wasn't, what was interesting about the guest list was that the person that did it wasn't surprising to me. But wait, I don't want to say too much. But the circumstances that led up to it caused so many surprises for me along the way. Like, when I was reading it, I would just literally be gasping out loud, and I would like slam the book down and be like, I can't read this anymore. So like that, it could surprise me along the way, and that also is a good I think a mark of a good book. Megan Miranda's book did that to me too. Like, I got surprised along the way.
Yeah, and you're always shocked. And I find that author too, like Megan Miranda, her mysteries. So I think another, I don't know if it's a genre, but I definitely notice a difference between mysteries that are done for like shock value. And one of the authors I can think of is like Sherry LaPena, when she did like The Couple Next Door and things like that. They're not bad novels, but everything that happens is just, I think, is a device to shock you and be like, oh my goodness. Whereas I find there are authors like Megan Miranda who are very meticulous about the way that they tell the story. And it's not necessarily done for shock value, but they're literally weaving like a very intricate, like well thought out. Like you knew that she knew what she wanted to have happen on the first page. So both are amazing in their own regard, because sometimes you want to pick something up and just go, and other times you want to think about it a little bit more. And there's just, I think that's what we were trying to say earlier, is there's just so many different types of mysteries out there that it's hard to classify them as just like one thing. And I know we were talking, you know, the other day, we were talking about like mysteries within other genres.
Like this one that I have right here.
Like this one that I also have right
Crescent
here.
City.
Like this one that I also have right here.
We also should say that we all bullied Kate into reading this book.
I'm so glad you did.
But yeah, have we talked about Crescent City before? I think we might have.
I don't know if we did, actually. I don't think we did. I think
it's an interesting story because it's definitely a fantasy novel.
Yes.
So
urban fantasy.
We've definitely talked about fantasy. It's urban fantasy, which means there's like cell phones and email and computers and all that fun stuff. But there is a huge mystery. So the beginning of the novel starts, the first few chapters, there's 2 best friends. There's Danica and Bryce. And they're out like living their best lives, like having a great time. And Danica goes home and Bryce is like, cool. Or no, Bryce goes out without Danica, and then she's texting her being like, come meet me, like I'm having a great time, I miss you. And she's like, I got stuff to do, I'll see you when you get home. And Bryce gets home, and unfortunately she finds Danica, and so Danica is part of like a pack because she's a werewolf, because it's a fantasy novel. She finds Danica in the pack murdered. And she sees something run out of the apartment, so she chases it, and it's like a whole thing. And then it fast forwards 3 years, and she gets caught up in the investigation essentially like of her death and what happened. So there's a, like, I would say good 50-60% of this book is mystery.
Absolutely.
It's a good murder mystery.
Yeah.
It's absolutely a murder mystery. Like, I would say it's a murder mystery, just like touted as a fantasy novel. Like, it happens to have like incredible world building and like really great fantasy characters, but it's a mystery and you have no idea what is going on.
Yeah.
And it's very well done. I loved it. I'm a little biased because I love the author, which is Sarah J. Maas, but
and it's also a romance.
Yes.
It really is. Yeah.
It's just all of the best genres. Like,
but for the purpose of today's discussion, it's a mystery, Kate.
Yes,
it's also a romance.
It's also the first in a series. So if you're into like fantasy series, first in a series.
Yeah,
but the rest isn't out yet, so don't feel overwhelmed, because you can just start it and then the next one isn't going to be out for a bit. Because I get overwhelmed when there are so many books in a series that I'm like, okay, I'm going to spend an entire summer reading all of these and I want to read other things, you know? So it's like, I like to read one at a time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's valid. And I know a lot of people are hesitant as well, especially with like fantasy and sci-fi. I find they tend to be really series driven.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to step outside your comfort zone and say, try a fantasy or a mystery within a fantasy, it's really hard when I'm like, here's this 8-book series, you should start it. And it might be really great, but some people just like are like, no.
It's overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. So I think there's something to be said for starting off slow. But yeah, you can find so many mysteries within other genres.
Yeah, there's actually one, I can't remember the title of it right now, but I'll make sure that I'll find it and we'll have the book cover up in the video. But there was one that I read not too long ago that was a romance, like a Victorian romance mystery. And it was very cool. It was a woman who, she runs a newspaper, and there was a murder, and she wrote an article condemning the police and how they were investigating it because she said that they weren't doing a good job. And then the next day they made an arrest, but she was determined that it was not the right person that they arrested. Lo and behold, she's invited to a party at someone's country house, and the murders continue. But this time the murders are all happening at the country house where she is. So the detective, who she basically wrote a newspaper article saying terrible things about his police work, he shows up to investigate the murders, and everyone at the party is on lockdown, but the murders just keep happening. So they know it's someone there. They're trying to figure out who it is, and it was really good. I honestly wasn't expecting it to have as much of a mystery vibe as it did, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was very fun. It was another, closed door mystery.
That sounds so good. I want to read that right now.
No.
No, but I think it just says something. Like, you can always, and sometimes it's like an unexpected pleasant surprise where you're like, oh, I think this is fantastic. Like, I read a really good, I would say it's like a historical mystery. So it's like historical fiction, but also a mystery. It was called The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. Did either of you read that one?
I haven't, but it's been on my list forever.
By Stuart Turnton. And it was interesting too. It's another closed or locked door mystery. But the cool thing is it's historical fiction in nature, and much like the guest list and the other one, like they're all invited to this big party, like on this estate. And they know that Evelyn dies. But what happens is the narrator, and we have another unreliable narrator, which I think is like a theme in mysteries, but the narrator experiences like a Groundhog Day type situation.
Oh.
So we don't know who the narrator is, but every morning they wake up in the body of somebody else in the house. And they have to spend their day, like talking to everybody, gathering all of the intel that they can, and then like, writing it all down, remembering whatever, and then going on to the next day. And then they wake up in like a different person's body. So they go through like each person of the house, which I think is a really interesting way.
That's so cool.
Story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So mysteries.
I need to read this now.
They're everywhere.
That sounds so good.
Yeah, I won't lie. It was a little slow to start. because I didn't know what was going on, and I was like, what is happening? But once I was in it, I was in it. So if you're gonna give it a go, either you two or any of the listeners, just give it like a good 50-60 pages. I promise you'll be hooked.
That sounds really cool.
It does sound really cool. I definitely want to read that. I'm a sucker for a good premise. I just, sometimes it's not carried out the best way, which I'm always sad about. But, you know, when it's a good premise like that, I will absolutely pick it up and maybe even spend my money on it rather than wait on it.
That's the key, right? As library workers, we're like, but would you buy it? Is a question that we ask ourselves regularly. And each other.
Like, if it's good enough and I see a holds list so long at the library, I'm like, first I'm going to check another library and then maybe I'll spend my money on this if the premise is good enough.
And then I will talk to my library friends whom I trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
Then I will go buy it.
Exactly. And I realized we also didn't talk about kids' mysteries, which we also wanted to mention. So for younger readers, there are tons of amazing mysteries that are also enjoyable for adults as well. One notable series that comes to mind is The Mysterious Benedict Society, which is this book is one of my favorite books of all time. And it just became a Disney Plus series. And I watched the first episode and I think it's great. It's really, really faithful to the book, which I love. At least the first episode is. I haven't watched past that. But basically the story of it, it's these 4 gifted children that they're all gifted in different ways, which is amazing. So like one character, Kate, who unsurprisingly was my favorite character as a child. She like carries around this red bucket with a whole bunch of tools and stuff. And she's like an acrobat and she just, you know, she can solve things by like climbing through vents and things like that. Like she always finds an amazing physical way to solve problems. And our main character is Rainy, and he's just got an amazing logical mind. Then we've got Sticky, who can just remember everything he's ever read. And so he is so good at solving problems just because he has all this knowledge. And then we've got Constance Contraire, who is just the most obstinate person in the world. So she just refuses. She just like will not listen to authority whatsoever. And so she just solves things by being the most annoying she can possibly be.
I love that for her.
It's so good. I love Constance. And they need to solve a mystery together. And they go to like this boarding school and they need to investigate the head of the boarding school who is causing a world panic and everything. And it's just, the puzzles in it are amazing. And it's a whole bunch of little mysteries built into a big one. So just like finding clues along the way, it's amazing. And I love it even as an adult. So that's a really good one to check out as well.
Children's mysteries do not get enough credit. Like I grew up reading Nancy Drew. And
same.
Oh my gosh. And I'm sorry, did anybody else play the Nancy Drew video game that I like couldn't solve because I wasn't a good enough like sleuth?
No.
Like there's some amazing kids mysteries out there. Like Harriet the Spy is a classic. Like the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew are classics. My nephew loves Theodore Boone Kid Lawyer, which
is John Grisham, right?
It's John Grisham, yeah. And it's like he's a kid lawyer and he has to like solve mysteries and then like fight them in court. His name's Theodore Boone, and it's great. There's just so much fun stuff out there that I think we sleep on because we're just afraid to branch out, or we don't want to really try something new, or we get set in what we like. And I think our main thing is just like try something new. You may be really surprised. Like Kylie likes cozy mysteries now, so
I do. It's actually funny. I was obsessed with mysteries when I was a kid. Like I loved Nancy Drew. I was constantly like, I'm going to solve mysteries like Nancy Drew. So like I was fully obsessed, and then I stopped reading mysteries, and now I'm getting back into it, and I'm like, oh yeah, I love these.
This is so good.
Yeah. It's like, wow, I forgot that I used to like these.
Yeah.
And something like a cozy would tap into those kid mysteries as well. Like it's that same whimsy to it, you know, like the finding clues. It's more fun and light. And that's what I loved about mysteries as a kid.
Yeah, that's the nice thing about kids mysteries, is they are light, and cozy mysteries are light. I like the dark ones, but that's just me.
I also like the dark ones. Like I love a good roof wear.
Oh, they're like The Turn of the Key is. Have you read that one
haven't
yet?
read The Turn of the Key yet. No, I
It's
haven't.
probably my favorite one. And another,
okay.
if you like dark mysteries, and like, you know, like Kate and I were talking about Megan Miranda and everything being really well woven. Another author I think deserves to be mentioned is Riley Sager. He writes, oh boy, he writes really good thrillers. Like gasping, the same as like Lucy Foley, like throwing your book, you maybe can't sleep when you put it down, but it's really worth it. I like my favorite one, in my opinion. He wrote one called The Last Time I Lied. And then a quick blurb is this girl was at a summer camp, and she was in a cabin with 3 other girls. So there's the 4 of them, and 3 of them go missing, and it sort of like haunted her whole life. And as an adult, she gets reached out to by the owner of the camp, and it's just basically like, you know what, like we're closing it down. We're inviting back old employees to come and, you know, like, you know, relive and yada, yada, yada. So she decides she's going to go for closure purposes, and it gets caught up in investigating the disappearance of these girls. And when I tell you I did not see the ending coming, it was really good. But yeah, Riley Sager will mess with your head. It's great.
Excuse me while I add it to my list.
I'll text you later.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're probably going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining us and listening to us. Just a reminder that we have a Discover Reads list at the library, which is a list personally curated by one of our librarians with a bunch of titles that we think you'll like. We also have Library to Go kits, which we've mentioned before, for both kids and adults. Don't forget, we have our TD Summer Reading Club for kids on right now. So if you want to get them some mysteries, you can sign up for that. You get points for reading, and you get little beads to add to a necklace. And last but not least, the library started a TikTok account, which is specifically for Readers Advisory, which we've mentioned before is a really fancy word of telling you what you should read because it's fun. So if you want to go look at Whitby Library on TikTok, you can find us. And as usual, we also have Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. So we will see you next month. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.